Miguel Iturrate back here on the CRP Minute, the Cage Rage podcast, working the lines here. And news is coming across the board here that two-time world champion in boxing, Paulie Malignaggi, a friend of ours here, is signed with the Bare Knuckle organization for a fight coming up in June of 2019. And what this brings to light is a lot of Paulie's ties to the Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather match. And I'm joined by our CRP MMA analyst, Devin Miller, to talk a little bit more about the potential for a McGregor versus Malignaggi in bare knuckle boxing. Devin, what did you think when you saw this coming across the news here? Did you immediately think, uh-oh, that could happen?
Well, I'm not so sure about where this is going to go. The one thing I do think is going to happen is before Malignaggi announced that he signed with Bare Knuckle FC, a couple weeks ago it was announced that Artem Lobov, who's longtime teammate of Conor McGregor, was cut from the UFC roster, and then now he's signed with Bare Knuckle FC. And then next thing we know, Paulie signed, and that looks like a fight that could be happening like in June. And everybody remembers the lead up to the Floyd fight, where all that controversy of the leaked training photo of video got leaked, where Paulie went to train with Conor, and I guess Conor scored a knockdown in sparring, and they leaked the video, and there was a bunch of back and forth leading up to his fight with Floyd between him and Malignaggi. So that's been there, and right now we're kind of in this. We just did a video on the stalemate of the lightweight division, where there's so many contenders up there, and Khabib's out until November, it looks like, and they've got an interim title fight going on, and Tony Ferguson's in the mix, and Ally Quinna, and all these different fighters. And maybe the most lucrative thing that Conor could do would be to pull together another boxing match. I don't believe that the combat sport fan world has it in him to go through another Floyd rematch at this point. But I do think the Malignaggi fight would be intriguing, and bare knuckle even more would add a little twist to it that makes it even more intriguing. So I definitely don't rule it out.
Now, I've been watching the bare knuckle world over the last few years, and they've made strides towards legitimacy, especially in England, where there are commissioners and things like that. They could use something of this nature. And what makes it interesting from the Conor McGregor perspective is that, he's Irish, and kind of bare knuckle fighting, it could be like, the Ireland's national sport kind of thing. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's going to be the kind of thing he shies away from. I think it's the kind of thing that he seems to present his, persona very well. I think this is the kind of thing that could add to that persona. Hey, he went and did a bare knuckle fight to end this rivalry they built up there, and he just did one bare knuckle fight. That would lift the BK organization up, miles in attention and stuff like that, and give them legs for a long, for a run of a couple of years at least, right? I think that's what Paulie wants. The Artem Lobov fight for Paulie maybe could happen, if it was part of a package that eventually gets him McGregor. I don't think we'll just wind up with him fighting Artem Lobov and then, the McGregor fight just doesn't happen. I think Paulie's going to need some assurances. Paulie's a former world champion, still 38 years old. I think he's looking for a big payday. At this point, you can't really blame him. The guy has diversified in his career real well. If you look at what he did towards the end of his career, after he was a world champion, he did things like, he went and fought in Italy because he's Italian. He wanted to win an Italian championship, national championship and stuff like that. So he's always been a guy who's looked for challenges. He made a great crossover into the, world of broadcasting and stuff like that, where he's one of the premier guys out there right now, and he's still young, so he's got a future there. But I think he still wants to compete, but he wants that big payday. He'd like to cash that big payday. He's from New York. He's also got personality, and that's translated on TV already, so we don't need to get into all that stuff. He wants a big payday, and I think, if he can lure McGregor into a bare-knuckle situation, you're talking about something that might approach, 50% of what they got for the Mayweather fight, and, $50 million, that's what gets Paulie's attention here. Not the chops of doing some bare-knuckles fight for a few $1,000 against tough guys like Artem Lobov and stuff like that. He wants McGregor, and he wants the big money.
I agree, and just a little note, I do agree with you about his commentating. I think he's a wonderful boxing commentator. I really think he's born just natural when it comes to that. But the big elephant in the room with this is, unlike Floyd Mayweather, who is just very autonomous in his promotion and promoting his own fights, and he can go off and do these little rising fights and stuff in Japan, and he can do these things and just anytime he wants. With Conor McGregor, he's under the UFC umbrella, so everything, and he's on contract with them, so everything's got to be passed through the UFC, and that's the only thing that I can see potentially being a roadblock down the line. Is they're going to want to know if we take this risk of you getting cut, of you taking another loss outside of our organization, we got to know that there's some kind of lucrative incentive for us to do this.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that they with social media now, they got all these different algorithms and different ways of gauging public interest, and they can throw out like little rumors like this on Facebook, and they can have public access to these kind of algorithms to kind of gauge the kind of public's interest, and they can look at comments and all that stuff. And if there's a fire behind it, and it's something that it appears it could bring in casual fans in the boxing world and the MMA world, I could see them going for it. If it's something that is just laughed off and there doesn't seem to be much interest about it, I don't know if the UFC's got it in them to do a whole nother round with a type of.
The UFC would have to recognize. Yep, the UFC I think would have to recognize that the potential exists for them to take bare knuckle boxing, which right now has to be considered a fringe sport still, and giving them a mainstream door. The UFC may not want to do that, like you said. At the end of the day, money talks, and if they're going to get the money, if it does happen, it is an interesting fight, and it is more watchable than a regular old boxing match, in that the bare knuckle aspect does make it that spectacle aspect. And for a guy like Paulie Malignaggi, just for MMA guys that don't know, Malignaggi is a guy with like 50 fights and like 10 knockouts. He's not a knockout artist. He's a style boxer, and that's what he wants to show McGregor. He wants to outpoint him. He's going to survive those 12 rounds or whatever it is that they do, and he's going to hit McGregor embarrassingly, because he's probably not going to hurt McGregor. So that's the game plan for Paulie. That's the only thing he can do. He really is unlikely to come in there with it. Now, of course, with bare knuckle, they're different things, but they can also break their hands real early. So it doesn't. It makes an interesting fight. And Paulie, style-wise, is a guy who's coming in with such pure boxing that, again, it makes an interesting fight. When they've done boxing matches with bare-knuckle guys or guys like that, the level difference has shown itself, and that's what Paulie wants to show the world here. So that's why, more power to him. May the best fighter win kind of thing. And McGregor, the bare-knuckle thing, that's kind of appealed to him. That's kind of appealed to him to say, hey, I'm, undefeated in bare-knuckle fighting. That'll sound real great right before 18-4 in the UFC or whatever he is, undefeated in bare knuckle fighting. So yeah, I think it all adds to the mystique. So I read this, and sometimes I get on the BS meter, and I think that this is a 50-50 shot that we actually get this to happen. So I wanted to talk about it. Anything else before we wrap up, Dev?
I think we covered it, Miguel.
Alrighty, sir. Then that's been our wrap-up of the rumors about Paulie Malignaggi signing with the Bare Knuckle Boxing Organization. Those aren't rumors. He is signed, but the rumors are now swirling that this is a preliminary step for potential Malignaggi versus McGregor wrap-up. I've been joined by our analyst, Devin Miller, to talk about that possibility and whether the UFC would allow it or not.